Hi everyone, welcome to the last official lesson of summer art camp. Once again, this is the second activity of Grounded in Nature Week. I'm Cyndi. I'm the program coordinator at WPCA and your teaching artist for the week. And today you are going to get to use clay. Clay is one of my favorite materials to work with, and I really like to make my own clay. So this week, I actually gave you all a clay that I've harvested myself. And as I go through this video, I realize I'll probably end up getting clay all over my face because I like really messy activities and my allergies are bothering me today. So, what you'll need for this week is I gave you 2 balls of clay. Well, actually I gave you 3 balls of clay, but you used one of them for your last lesson. And what you should have left is 1 reddish brown ball of clay and then 1 gray brown ball of clay. And you are going to use both of those. And what else that you're going to need is either plastic saran wrap to work on to have your materials dry, or a plastic lid, just something plastic for your piece to dry on, and leaves and organic materials, so things that you find outside, maybe pine needles, maybe leaves or flowers that you find, just different materials that you have seen around your yard that you think would look cool to make texture on your pots today. So some of the plants that I have are actually from my garden. So let me show you what I've got here. Oh, I just spilled some water, so one moment. The first thing that I have is a squash blossom. So let me get the focus here. So this is what a squash blossom looks like. This is a flower from a squash plant. And this is what happens right before you get the squash. And I know I gave you all squash seeds, so if you plant those seeds, this is what the flowers are gonna look like. You have, or I at least have, a couple of other cool little purple flowers. It doesn't matter what color your flowers are, you're just looking for the texture. I have a maple leaf here. There we go, it focused. And then I have lemon balm. This is one of my favorite plants. It smells really good. It smells like lemon peels, which is delightful. And what I'm gonna do now for the rest of this video is I'm gonna tilt it down so you can see what I'm doing on the table. Okay, here we go. So, I'm going to show you 2 different ways of rolling or making a pot here. The first one is just a regular pinch pot. And so what I'm going to do is make sure this is in a nice little ball. If your clay feels a little dry, if it's cracking as you're working with it, just take a little bit of water, have a little cup of water with you, and just rub it on the clay and keep adding a little water as you're working with it, just a little bit. So I'm going to take this, and I got a little plastic bag. So I used the plastic bag that I stored my clay in. And when you're making your pots today, use 1 ball of clay per pot. So please don't mix them, keep them separate so you can compare the differences between the 2 in the end. So I'm going to actually start off by placing the clay on the table and pushing a little bit and starting to roll it on the plastic so I get a nice flat bottom here. So you see here that's nice and flat. Let's focus a little better. There we go, so it's nice and flat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently push a little hole in to the top. I'm going to turn it. So I don't want to push too hard or too quickly. And I'm just using 1 little finger here to start to get that going. So you can see it starts to look like a donut. And now that I got a little bit of a surface there, of the surface of the hole going, I'm going to start using my thumb, stick my thumb in there, and start pinching and turning. And you want to make sure to do little pinches and little turns like this. So, see, it's not growing very huge. You want just little bits. And you just pinch and you turn and you pinch. And when you're pinching, you don't want to pinch towards the bottom. You pinch these sides together. So just a little bit, because when you pinch just a little bit, it keeps everything nice and even. And it's going to naturally have some cracks, especially if you're using the homemade clay for your pinch pot, which is the gray tan one. If you're using that, that's going to have more cracks. So don't worry too much. Just make sure you work slowly and gently with it. It would be like, I'd say it's like when you're just gently picking up a little bug or picking off a little flower. You don't want to squeeze it too hard to cause harm to what you're grabbing. You just want to do it just enough to get that pressure. And you can even see that you have a little bit of indentations for my fingers as I'm going around. And my pinch pot's going to be pretty small. I don't want it too big. For these pinch pots, you can decide if you want to use them for around your house. Maybe you want to just stick change in there, or you want to use them for your keys when you get home from school. Or maybe you want to put a plant in there. And if you want to put a plant in there, then you're going to have to put a little, maybe a pencil-sized hole in the bottom. So I've noticed that mine is cracking a little more. And I don't want to go any bigger than this. So instead of adding water, I'm just going to kind of gently work on those edges where I see cracking and just kind of rub them so they start to go back and rejoin, because this clay is really soft already and I don't want to cause it to be too soggy and sticky. And I really like when the clay has a little more of a raw texture when I'm working with it. Which is why I like to make my own clay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place it on the plastic again instead of working within the air. And I'm just going to push gently on the corners to give it more of a cup, like a cylinder-like bottom. So instead of having something that's more of a bowl, I want more of a cylinder like this. So I'm pushing on the outer corners of this circle. So I'd be pushing right around the outer sides of the circle to just gently make that more of an even shape on the bottom. And when you do that, it also makes sure that you have a flat bottom. Now, this is where the plants come in. I've got this texture on my pot, but for me, I want something unique. So I'm going to take this plant, and if you look at the back of the lemon balm leaves, you can see the veins of them. So plants like us have veins, and the veins bring nutrients to the plant. So by taking this and pushing it against the clay, the vein side, it's going to make an imprint on the pinch pot. So I'm going to take this gently and just push it on there. Not very hard, just enough so it stays on there. And then I'm going to keep turning it. And I'm going to repair those corners where I see cracking happening. Now I noticed that I see some cracks happening here, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rip this little flower petal mostly in half. And then I'm just going to make it stick along both sides of the top here. So I'm going to pinch that so it sticks here on the inside and outside. And then I'm going to keep adding more textures. Like I said, slowly, so you don't want to go too fast And I haven't added any extra water during this process. Now what you're going to notice when you're working with the two different types of clay is that the reddish brown clay is actually probably going to be smoother because it is a factory made clay actually. So when you have a factory made clay, they actually remove extra particles in the clay to keep it from cracking, and they have a couple additives. So for this one, I'm actually just going to trim that top off right there. I'm going to trim this top off because I don't necessarily need it right there. I'm just going to keep pinching it so it has that texture and keep repairing it as I go. So pretty happy with this. I think that this has some cool textures on it. So what I'm going to make sure to do, what's really important, is to find a little pencil, write my name on the bottom or my initials, so I just put CB, and then I put a star next to it so that I know that if it's my CB, and then I'll put it back down and I'm going to let that dry on the plastic. I brought a little plastic container here so I can transfer this to show you the other technique. And these don't have to be perfect and they don't have to be smooth. I just want them to be able to be holding containers. So this next style is going to be a coil pot. So what I'm going to do at first is just cut off a little piece of clay. You can use scissors, you can use string to just pull it across. I just had scissors available. I'm going to roll the bottom here. I'm actually going to be right back. So while I'm going to run and grab something, I want you to go make sure you have a little cup of water to work with. So I will be right back. Okay, so I just grabbed some water here, and I'm gonna dip my little clay in water because it sat out a little too long. It's a little dry here, and I'm just gonna start flattening the bottom. Ooh, see that cracking? So let me roll this real quick, get that water, that moisture in there. I'm just gonna gently push on the bottom. Like I said, this is the homemade clay, so it's gonna crack a little more than most factory made clays. So I'm gonna start off by making the bottom just a little bigger than a pop socket. So I'm gonna make it bigger than that. And you don't want it any thinner. I'd say you want it to be as thick as about 2 3/4 stacked on each other. So I'm gonna set that down, and I'm gonna make little markings at the edge. This is called scoring, or you might think of it as scratching. So I'm just scratching the surface just along the edge. Before you start scratching, I'd say wait for me to show you what it looks like. So as you all can see here, I actually only gently scratched the outside edge. So I'm going to set this back down, and I'm going to pinch off a piece of clay here and roll a coil. And as I'm rolling it, I'm just going to keep testing it to see if it's going to be big enough to cover the circumference, so the outside of the circle. So it just fits on the outside. So what I'll do is I will add a little bit of water just along where I scored. And then I'm going to place this down on top of it. And I'm going to gently just pinch the inside downward. Just enough to start to connect it. So I gently just pushed downwards on those inner edges to bring it to that next level, the bottom level there. And I'm going to repeat the scratching the top right there, just gently. You don't need much. You don't need a whole lot of pressure, especially with this soft clay. When I say push down, just a reminder, I don't mean push down like that. I mean push down on the inside wall. You might notice that as I'm doing these last few, I stick my hand right on the side, and that's because it helps support the wall so it doesn't fall back or forth. Be definitely taken and put together, so if you like the pinch pot look and you like the coil look but you want a little bit of both, you can actually do a little bit of both. Now what I'm actually going to do is take this squash blossom and I'm going to rip it apart. And I really like this texture. So I'm going to take this texture and push this against this wall, and I'm just really going to gently push that in. I really like to make sure that, for me at least, a lot of my petals and leaves I let stay on when the piece is dry. And I usually don't take it off when I put it in the kiln actually, because when it goes in the kiln it catches fire and it burns off, so then there's nothing left. I also noticed I have the little end of the squash blossom, so I'm actually just going to take that little end and find a little place on the inside to stick that. And I'm just going to stick random leaves all along the inside and outside now, because I really like this texture. I've got a maple leaf here. I'm going to layer this here. Even tuck this underneath the bottom there. I want to know what kind of leaves you're using. Tell me about which ones you chose if you know the name of them, or show me pictures of your process as you go along, because I think it's really cool to see the transformation that these pieces go through. Here's my coil pot. And like I said before, when you have finished your piece, before it fully dries, just make sure that you write your name on the bottom or your initials. My second piece, all done. So I've got all of these, and I'll let them all dry on here. Like I said, make sure you dry it on a plastic surface so that that piece, the reason why you do that is because that piece is, if you put it on paper or cardboard, it's going to warp as it dries. This allows it to dry evenly. One last thing to note is after your pieces are all done, if you bring these pieces into WPCA, you can actually have them fired and they will be permanent pieces. So they will be forever in these shapes and will forever have these patterns. If you don't fire them, if you don't bring them in, then you can reuse this clay over and over again. You just get it wet and then you can start working it again. So thank you all for joining me, and we are going to have one last video. I'm going to turn you all up towards me. So one last video will be posted on Google Classroom probably towards this weekend, which is how to make clay, and that's my bonus video to you all because you all have been such a great audience over all the summer art camp. I appreciate you all taking the time, both to you students and your parents for taking the time to pick up the kids and watch these videos. And we hope to see you all soon. Make sure you're staying safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all next time.